Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the special school board meeting of Tuesday, December 20th, 2016. If we would please rise for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance before we begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for coming this morning to our special meeting. The focus of this meeting is to provide another opportunity for the school board collectively to interview our finalists for the next superintendency of Lake County. We have one finalist today that we're going to introduce, and that's Diane Kornegay. We've also flipped the order of our agenda today to do public input at the end, so that way we can be respectful of getting the interview on time here. But if you would like to speak during public input, so far I have one card. Feel free to come on up. You can fill out a card. Please give that to Natalie. But additionally, we'll have public input opportunity following tonight's question in the session, as well as on Thursday before the board makes its final decision. And so without further ado, Ms. Kornegay, please come on up.
To the hot seat?
Yes.
Good morning.
Each board member has had the opportunity to prepare a question that they'd like to ask today, this morning. But before we do that, I'm not sure if there's anything that you would like to share with the board, or just give a brief introduction or hello, or
Absolutely.
provide some sort of transition.
So yes, good morning. Thank you.
Sure.
I just have to say I've spent on and off the past week here in Lake County, and I am tremendously encouraged by the community, the pride, just how fabulous everyone has been. Yesterday was a good opportunity. I met with 7 different stakeholder groups, and we had a great conversation, and it was all focused on how do we bring about change and improvement for kids. Everyone is in this, and it's exciting to see the community coming together, really focusing on how we can make collective commitments to improving student achievement and making just a great place to work and learn here in Lake County. So I'm excited about this opportunity, and I just thank you all for allowing me to come back and to be a part of this process that's been fabulous.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Sandy, can we start with you down there on the end? Or do we have a volunteer otherwise?
I'm fine.
All right, very good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In your packet you gave us in your superintendent action plan, in goals 2 and 4, you mentioned a couple different things about how you would do things and get out into the schools and meet with the public and different action groups and stakeholders, and then also assess some of the situations there of how we could better do. My question is, in my campaign running for this position, I got hit by a lot of people, and mainly a lot of teachers. And a lot of their concerns is, I'm told that our teachers fill out a lot of paperwork daily, and it limits their time to teach the students if completed during the class day. If they choose to teach their class, then they have to stay after work and fill out the paperwork to be turned in. What would you do to correct this situation so that the teachers are spending more time working with the students and not doing just a lot of paperwork?
Well, certainly increasing instructional time and time in front of kids would be a priority. I know that often there's local practices and policies that are put into place that often would require such paperwork. I want to know what the paperwork is. What is it that they're being asked to complete and why? You've heard me talk a lot about why, understanding why are we doing what we're doing. So I'm going to ask that question to find out why they're filling out so much paperwork, what is it that they're doing, and is it in the best interest of kids? And that will always be the question.
And I saw also that in the evaluation or the site trip, that one of the last statements on page 1, it talked about you've eliminated testing waste where you're at now.
Correct.
And that's something that we have here. I feel that I'm hearing all the time from teachers, we just test.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody will admit, but parents will tell you all they're doing is teaching for the test. So how would you approach that?
So I would agree there is way too much testing going on. And I've looked at your assessment calendar. And I do have some questions about it. So one of the things that the state says you have to progress monitor students. That's just good practice. You have to know where your kids are. Teachers know where their kids are. You could probably walk into any classrooms and teachers can identify the specific needs of their learners. That's just good practice. So asking them to do additional local assessments on top of state mandated assessments is not good practice in my mind, and something that I want to talk again to staff, to teachers, to school leaders to talk about what's the purpose of the test. Again, why are we doing it? If it makes sense, then maybe I could get on board. If it doesn't make sense, then we'll get rid of it. We've done that in the district that I'm in now. We really looked at our local assessments because that's what we can control. There's some things we just cannot control.
Right.
But we can control what we put in front of kids at the local level. We were doing progress monitoring from the district level quarterly. And also there were some built-in additional assessments as well for foundational skills at the K-2 level. And really looked at how do we just put that back on teachers, let them have the autonomy that they need, and ask teachers to work collectively together. First of all, to know what it is that kids need to know and be able to do. Know what the standards are. And then they determine what the assessments are. How do you know that your kids are learning what they need to learn? And really that's up to the teacher. We can do that through multiple avenues. Portfolio assessments, where they're collecting evidence the students work towards the standard. Observations, as teachers can sit down individually in conference with a child, or small group instruction, which is a great way to know where kids are, and letting the teachers have the autonomy to determine what the needs of their kids are based on their collective understanding of what kids need to know and be able to do. And then if they're showing that they're not learning, what are you going to do about it? Let the teachers work on what is their plan to provide intervention services and small group instruction to meet the individual needs of kids. And then what do you do when they already know it? So if they have opportunities for acceleration, what do those look like in the classroom? And how are we truly differentiating instruction to meet the individual needs of kids?
Thank you very much.
Christy, would you like to ask the next one? Sure.
Thank you. I have a bit of a cold. By looking through your background and all of the information you've given us, I feel fairly confident in your educational experience. So I wanted to ask you a question on your more executive experience. So my question for you is, and I wrote it down, while a school system is not a business, it can benefit from business-like practices. Good businesses are regularly restructuring with either internal or external resources to ensure efficiency. Do you have the executive experience and the strength of character to identify the organizational problems in the district and help us restructure to eliminate the excessive bureaucratic ways? And I know this could be a yes or no question, so please elaborate.
Oh, I was just going to say yes, thank you. So recently, and I think I've told you this experience, looking at the budget as one example of how I would address that. And my action plan is very specific in the details about how I would go about doing that and how I've done it in the past. So that's one example as we look at every single line item, looking at every contracted service, looking at every position, the people, and as your question is really posing, is making sure that we have the right people in the right places, if I understand your question, and really looking at the organizational design of that. Before I leave here today, one of the things that I would like to have is an organizational chart. I found two organizational charts. One, the finance department had theirs posted online, and I found the overall district one, but it didn't give me a lot of detail. Just so that I can get a feel for how the organization is designed, what positions it currently exist, why they exist, how are they supporting our schools. I told you before that my priority is going to be making sure that not only that we have the right people in the right places, the right positions to support schools. And so that's going to be the priority. So yes, I will certainly make the hard decisions. I will bring to you proposals as to organizational changes that I think would best serve our school and our community. I've done that before with the budget, putting the right people in the right rooms and saying we're not walking away until we've cut $3 million from this budget. It was some hard decisions, and I held them to task. It was a very collaborative process, and at the end of the day, it was not easy. There were some positions that had to be eliminated, but they were for the right reasons. They were positions that have been historically or traditionally in place, but we have better ways to deliver the services to schools than through the positions that existed. So they went away, and I've taken some heat from that. In fact, one of the things I think you've heard from an individual who was not pleased with the decision that I made, that was the sole reason why that person reached out to say, oh, let me tell you, she's trouble. It was because I made a decision that wasn't popular, but it was the right decision for the district. And a person impacted by that was very upset with me. And they reached out to folks. I guess they felt like I had not done right by them, but I made the right decisions for kids in the district. So I'm a strong leader, and I will be a visionary who's going to look at every aspect of the district to make the right decisions in the best interest of kids. So, yes. Go back to the simple answer. Yes. Yes, I will, and yes, I do.
Mrs. Kornegay, I feel very comfortable that I have a handle on your focus on academic success. However, developing the whole child is important. Can you speak to the concept of developing the whole child?
Yes. So what you're referring to is social and emotional learning, which is something that is critical to meeting the needs of the whole child. This time last year, I was one of 5 people across the country who was invited to speak at a convening in Washington, D.C. on the emphasis of we're always talking about academics and how important the academic process is, but yet you have to balance that with the social and emotional aspects of kids. And so often that's a forgotten process and something that I've been a strong advocate for. So I was the only educator in the nation asked to speak at this convening. I met before members of Congress, business leaders, other educators, and in a room right across from the Capitol. And we talked about how does a district ensure that the social and emotional needs of children are met. And it was actually moderated by the editor of Education Week. There was the other panelists included a member of the Southern Education Foundation, the National Writing Project, Special Olympics. It was a diverse group, all focused on social and emotional needs of students. And the reason why they had invited me was because I've shown in our district that there has to be that balance between academics and social and emotional learning. And I had done that by really being an advocate that it's part of the academic process. It's not something that you do for 10 minutes a day, something that's set aside and say, okay, now we're going to close your books, let's talk about social and emotional learning. But how do you embed that into an academic culture by setting up a structure? And we did that by ensuring that every day in every classroom, kids had time to read, write, think, and talk. So I talked about how you develop a structural framework, and one that we adopted was by Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry. And it's a 5-part process that ensures that kids focus, you have the academic time, but embedded in that is a time for kids to talk together, to talk about diversity. And this is a very diverse community. How do you bring those children from diverse populations together to have respect and mutual conversations about? And so we did that through developing time to ensure that in every day there's collaborative time for kids to talk. K-12, it became an expectation. How are kids getting together and having conversation about what they're learning? So I talked about that, and it was really led to some great opportunities for me to explore other avenues to bring in social and emotional learning programs for kids. So.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions? Like, it would be brief. Is the program you're talking about Making Meaning? The one by Fisher and Fry?
No, the Fisher and Fry it's a framework, and it's a 5-step instructional framework that actually became our teacher observation tool. It includes the teacher establishing the purpose for the lesson, guided practice, modeling by the teacher. If you've heard of the gradual release model, it's I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, and then you're going to do it. It kind of follows that concept. So again, purpose, guided practice, modeling, independent time, and collaborative time for kids to work together on whatever the project or skill or strategy that they're working on. So it's not a program, it's a structure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity on Friday to come and meet the folks from your district, and it was such a pleasure to go. And the synonymous threads that were heard throughout the day were very, very complimentary of you. I have shared with the board my notes, my handwriting, so I hope that they're decipherable. I tried to type everything up. I was going to just kind of summarize, but then I felt that you guys should have the benefit of all of them. So I appreciate your time that day, the organizational structure that you put into the day.
Thank you for coming.
It was wonderful, so thank you for that. Our Florida legislator, our legislators constantly make decisions that impact every aspect of education, our day-to-day operations, our capital plans, our personnel evaluations, et cetera. How have you handled these decisions in the past? Can you give an example of how Clay County has reacted or your involvement in planning for those elements?
So we react slowly. And you're right, there's so many mandates that come down from the state and federal level, and I'm not about compliance. I will always follow the law. We will. But again, sometimes you just have to ask, why are we doing this, and how does it benefit kids? One example of that was the use of the VAM score tied into teacher evaluation. That mandate that just didn't make sense to me. Taking a one-time state assessment and tying it to teacher evaluations and basing their pay on that, not to mention the implications on kids. Talk about over-testing. It really led to, we're going to give a test to kids so that we can base a teacher evaluation on that test. And so it really just, it made no sense to me. So I worked alongside of teachers and I said, how do we want to tackle this? Here's what the law says that we have to do. I really looked into it. I am a gray person. The black and white world doesn't do well for me sometimes. Like I said, I can operate in it, but I really like the creativeness of working in the gray world, and really it gives you an opportunity to explore, what other avenues are available for kids. So we looked at, I kind of went into my gray shell and said, what can we do to ensure that we comply with the law? And if you looked at the legislation closely, it says that 50%, and this was at the time it originally rolled out, 50% of the evaluation has to be based on performance of student indicators or indicators of student performance plus the VAM score. So I said, okay. I realize what they're trying to say here, but I'm going to focus on the part that says and other indicators of student performance. So when we developed the evaluation system, we took about 6 different indicators of practice that Marzano had said were great indicators of practice, using portfolios, keeping data notebooks, data meetings, working together, and that whole differentiation piece that we talked about, and using those indicators of performance as the major portion of that 50% of the evaluation. We made VAM about this much of that evaluation system. Submitted it to the state, it was approved. Okay, so for 3 years we had a state-approved evaluation system that really VAM had very little bearing on at all because it was such a small amount of the evaluation. Here we go to year 4, and they said your evaluation does not comply with state law. And I said, well, wait a minute. Complied for 3 years, law hasn't not changed at all. So why are you telling me now that it doesn't meet the statute? They said, well, we've never read it before. So I said, well, and that's my fault. How? So I pushed back, and I said, we've been doing it this way for 3 years. I'm going to push back. So I drug it out for another year. It went through the legal department at DOE, and they came back and said, no, that was never the intent of the law. We realize how you read it, but that's not what we meant. So we had to go back and make some revisions to that, and we've done that collaboratively. I met with the teachers again, and I said, okay, we're done with this. How can we go back to the table, ensure compliance with state statute? And at that point, they had reduced it to 33.33%, which helped. And we got creative behind the scenes of that too. And publicly, I won't talk about all of that because I don't want that to come into question. Although it does comply with state statute, it went back out. It has been approved. And we now have a state-approved evaluation system that everyone's happy with. So I think to answer your question, I don't react quickly. I want to weigh the pros and cons of the state mandate. I want to find a way to address it in the best interest of kids. And when it just doesn't make sense, I'm willing to push back.
Can I follow up? And just to clarify, Marzano, Danielson, Clay County doesn't use either of those frameworks, from my understanding.
We do not. We developed our own, which was permitted by the state to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, here's my question. Given the lack of adequate capital funding, Lake County is behind in modernizing schools and adding necessary capacity. So what process would you use to prioritize projects, and are there any conditions where you would consider adding to our existing debt instead of adhering to a pay-as-you-go philosophy?
Well, as I said in the action plan, certainly your funding is an issue. Again, you have to get creative. You have to repurpose resources that you have because there's not going to be an additional funding coming in. I would not be in favor of increasing our debt. because I think that there's some internal moves that we can make, going back to looking at organizational positions and people, looking at programs, looking at services. I think there's a way that we can get creative in doing things a little bit differently. I also want to look at other revenue streams. Prior to the last legislative session, I was in Tallahassee. I walked the halls. We came in with some legislative priorities to increase funding for our high schools, specifically for our career academies. I worked along our legislative delegation, completing all the Senate and budget request forms, and took it to Tallahassee and walked away with $1 million. I'm familiar with that process. I will be an advocate for additional funding for the district, but we have to be creative internally as well and seeking other grants. There's a lot of other revenue sources that we can tap into. But increasing debt is really not an option in my mind. We've got to go the opposite direction. And so I'm going to get into the budget, and collectively we're going to make some decisions, probably some hard decisions about how we can reduce costs, but increase efficiency in the same time.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
May I follow up?
Yes, please.
And I would like more information about this anyway, but it kind of stems off Mr. Dodd's question in regards to one of my discussions with Mr. Van Zant.
Mm-hmm.
He spoke about Department of Defense grants for STEM funding,
Yes.
and that you were the leader of that initiative. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we have about $7 million over the past 3 years that have come in through the Department of Defense. Lake County probably wouldn't qualify for that specific grant because it's specific to the number of kids that you have from military families. Again, it was a way to seek additional revenue. I know you'll have an MSP grant, and there's other things related to the STEM field that we could possibly pursue in terms of grant funding. I'd love to see, I haven't looked at what your percentages are in terms of your military population, but if that's not an option, we will certainly look for other sources. But that's one creative way of looking at this, and that looking at different revenue sources. But we did that really just by having that close community partnership with the chamber, the county commission, and others who were strong advocates of seeking additional funding as well. So.
Do any other board members have follow-up questions? I think we got through those kind of quickly. Or if somebody's got an alternate question they might have prepared, feel free to use this opportunity for it. Yes, we. Those were the directions.
Okay, I followed the directions. My alternate question was, Finland, according to the PISA, has one of the best educational systems in the world. The organization of their system, in my understanding, having read books on them, is surprisingly low and flat. Flat organizational structure, meaning like the ministry pretty much gives money directly to the districts, which is then distributed to the pretty much to the principals. How do you feel about administration acting as primarily support personnel for the professional teachers in the classroom? Second, how do you feel about creating leadership career paths for teachers who stay within the classroom, such as a master teacher pathway, as opposed to a teacher? Currently, the only way, like, say, a 12-year teacher can progress is by moving into an administrative position.
Well, and that is a problem. Often your best teachers do go on to other positions. And so keeping your best teachers in the classroom would certainly be something that we would want to do. So one of the things that I've thought about creatively is a model that some of the other districts use to deal with that, and providing kind of lead teachers or mentor teachers within the classroom who do service. They still are in front of kids, but they still contribute to the leadership process by mentoring and coaching. Often that's what happens when we have specialists or you have coaches that are your best teachers that come out of the classroom, and they're not in front of kids anymore. So how do we keep the best and brightest in front of kids, I think is what you're asking. And I think you can do that if you can incentivize them to stay where they are. But it's, the structures that we have in place, unlike Finland and other places, is about progression and moving up. And, we certainly want to support people in their career goals. And, you have to have your top teachers often become your top leaders too. And I think that's important. I think that the principal and your assistant principals in your school have to be some of your best teachers who understand best practice, because first and foremost, while they're responsible for developing a great culture within their school, they have to be instructional leaders, and so you need your best people.
Right, just to be clear, I don't mean people who don't want to stay in the classroom. I mean, just means, I believe there's a population of people who would like to stay in the classroom but still have a professional career, if that makes sense. Have a career in which they're able to build professionally. Am I phrasing that correctly? And so that's what I'm trying to mean. And I think you answered that.
Okay. Yeah, I hope I did. I'm not sure that I really understood the question, but I hope I did.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, please.
In some of what our notes are that we received this morning, which I appreciate this, Stephanie, very much. And it talks about, this one individual says, as a principal, I have control in my building. There are some things they require us to do, but we do it how we want to do it. Is this something that you inspire for the principals at the schools would have more control of their schools maybe than what they have right now in our county?
Well, and I believe in autonomy. I think you trust your leaders. The principals, in my mind, they're the most critical position in improving student achievement, and you have to have those in those positions that you trust. I told the principals when I met with them yesterday, I always start with, I will trust you until you give me a reason not to. And I think that I'm hard-pressed to find an administrator who I can't trust to take care of their building, to take care of their community and their kids. So I really do rely on them and give them the autonomy. We have practices that are standardized and things and expectations that we've all agreed upon. And I think that that's when there is a common vision and a mission and everyone has collectively committed to that, you can let people go. Every community and every school is diverse. The principal in that community knows best the needs. So, I try to, I know you asked a minute ago about support. That is the role of the district office. We are to support. We are not to, just the keepers of information and passing down information and being a dictatorship. This is a community, and collectively we move together. And so that principal was referring to, yes, that is my practice, and what I've given them is some autonomy to lead their buildings, to make decisions that they feel are in the best interest of kids, because I know that that's where their heart is.
And you spoke of this in the first question I asked about the teachers know. Because I'm one of these, I don't believe one size fits all. What works in the north end of the county may not work in the south end or in the central part. So therefore, as we were you made a comment that the teachers know what their students need, and it may be different than what maybe the county is saying, that this is how you need to do it. So you're allowing that principal then to override maybe what the county is saying, we need to do it this way specifically, or they have the autonomy to do that, or?
No, they don't override anything that the district says. It's just that they were at the table when the decisions were made initially. So we all talk about, whether it's a mandate that's come down and how we're going to implement this, or meeting with principals regularly. What you will find is that I'm going to be in the buildings. They'll know that I will be there to support them. Because I know their individual needs, because I'm there, it makes it better or easier for me to support them in the decisions that they're making. So we make decisions collectively that meet the needs of all kids, and you're right, we do have to make individual decisions based on the needs of each individual community as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Do you have any closing remarks that you would like to share with us, or something that perhaps you didn't have the opportunity to address in any of our questions this morning?
I've answered a lot of questions over the past
I bet
couple
you
of
have.
days. And had some
Yes, indeed.
And had some great conversation. Again, I can't reiterate enough how fabulous this opportunity has been, how excited I am about the next step of the process, the possibility of being your lead learner here in Lake County, and the amazing things that we can do together for kids. I am just touched at how the board has, as y'all came together unanimously to select me as your sole finalist, was truly an amazing honor, and I am just so appreciative. And I will not disappoint. If all goes well on Thursday, just know that I will come ready. I will work together with you. Everything that I've said in my action plan, you will hold me accountable for. But I will make you proud.
Well, thank you. Just to clarify a little bit tonight, so that will be the opportunity for the public to be able to come in and get some of their questions answered. And so certainly some of those might be questions that you've heard in a similar format before, and some will, potentially be new topics that are coming up from the community. And so they'll have an opportunity to submit some questions, and then we'll ask those on their behalf so they can get to know you a little bit better.
Great.
And once again, tonight we'll give you an opportunity to give a bit of an introduction, if you'd
Okay.
like, for the members of the public who have not
Wonderful.
participated in the process up to now.
Very good.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Oh, sure, please.
I'm a little bit out of order, but but from the first time that we went through the process, and in my 34 years in my company, that when I shake hands with someone, that's a strong indicator of how that relationship's going to go forward. And so far, I've watched you and watched your mannerisms. I held a little personality test, by the way, and she scored the highest on that. I won't speak about the other results because it was for me to process. But and all of your answers are well balanced and thoughtful. What would really aggravate you, or what could we expect when should someone cross you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I am very calm. I don't get riled up. I never get loud. When someone crosses me, I'm going to address it, and that's what you can expect. I'm not going to, if somebody wants to call me out on something or they're upset with me about something, we're going to sit down and have a conversation. And I guess that's really what you can expect, that you can address it. Anything that is upsetting to me will come I'll follow up with a conversation. You'll never see me get loud or ugly or, I don't know if that addresses that at all. That was, yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, you bet. All right, well, thank you very much. For the next portion of our meeting, we have an opportunity for public input. I have just the one card. Vance Yoakum?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a surprise. Hi, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I actually was not going to ask any questions of Mr. Kornegay because I got to wait until this evening. Ms. Kornegay. However, the personality test that Mr. Mathias talked about, I'd be worried that maybe it was skewed towards kitchen design practice. It was. In his business. So, what I want to do is I've been monitoring Trump's cabinet appointments and staff appointments on a daily basis. I've been watching to see, I've been looking at the people that are being appointed, and I just wanted to share that I think that you need to start planning for some major shifts and probably schedule a retreat or something to discuss that. Once he gets in office, you're going to see more, but just reading even the kinds of books that have been written by some of the people that have been appointed to that, and Betsy DeVos and the things that she's talked about in education, that you're going to see some major changes. And that I would think that one of the things to do is to try and do what you can to control how it affects this county. And what that means is get more involved in the legislature, getting some people on the committees there that you can in education, because Trump's talked about putting up some $20 billion to be used in education, plus a lot he expects the states to put up related towards charter schools and others, and that you need to follow that pretty well and have something in motion, because you don't want Hillsborough County or somebody else to define how that rolls down to the county level here. And that's probably it, is that, another thing is that it's going to put a lot more emphasis on voucher programs and charter schools. And having sat through some of the committees here, not only here, but the internal committee when they chose the charter school, is that you probably want to start doing more outreach. I know Mr. Mathias has done some of that to get in touch with the better charter school operators or the people that do that, so that you're on their list, and so that we don't get the weak ones coming here instead. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments. With that, we'll move into board. Oh, Oh, was there another one?
Okay.
Are you sure? It's all right. Okay. All right, with that, we'll move into board member comments, if anybody has anything that they need to share before tonight.
I'll just wait till tonight.
All right, very good. Kristen?
I have a couple points.
Sure.
I just wanted to apparently according to Robert's rules, I have to warn the board that I would make a motion to reconsider the motion regarding Ms. Kornegay. This was very weird. The way we set up the motion was that if our top pick, then it would go to the second one. And I'm just saying that I would make a motion to reconsider that motion. I would do that in the case that we.
I'm not exactly sure what you want to do.
According to Robert's rules, otherwise it has to be a 3/4 vote, and I'm not sure if .33 means 4-3. Otherwise, it has to be just a majority rule vote.
What do you want to reconsider?
Accepting the next two. I just think we should discuss
I
it.
understood the motion that you had, unless you took some negative action regarding this candidate, then the other two candidates wouldn't be reconsidered.
Yeah, and I think we'll end up making that decision on Thursday morning to speak about the finalists we have. And I guess through that discussion, and that would probably be the most appropriate time to.
I thought it was an automatic going to the next two, if
No.
not.
I-
Okay, that
I-
was what I understood the motion to
Okay.
be at the time. That's why I was.
I think it was.
Oh,
Yeah.
that if we were not
That's
to
why I was
approve
saying
our
we should
finalists,
discuss it.
we would bring the original motion was to bring the next two to town. And
Right.
so you were suggesting that.
I would
you would
like
like
to
to-
put forward a motion to reconsider the motion so that we could just discuss, do we want to bring the next two?
I see.
Okay. So we could discuss that then.
Okay.
Now that I've said that. Then the other point I have to make is that I was able to do a fact-finding sort of mission. And I've brought up before, this is unrelated to her at all, but I've brought up a legislative liaison before. And I was able to meet with the group that does the counties, Lake Counties legislative, their legislative group. And they brought in like $7 million to our county last year. The city of Claremont piggybacked onto their contract, and the city, and we could potentially do the same sort of piggyback. And so the reason I bring it up today, because it's an awkward time, is because I talked to Mr. Johnson about this as well, because we could make a special meeting right after the meeting on Thursday to just,
The meeting Thursday is a special meeting.
we could add this to the
So you
agenda.
could have the chairman declare it to be an emergency because of the timeliness and consider it as.
Right, and the timeliness is because if we want to have a legislative liaison in this session, they are already in committee talks. And session starts in February, February, March, I think. And they're already in committee talks December, January, into February. And so if we want to, basically, if you're not at the table, you're on the table as a menu item. So that's the old saying, but, so I just would like to have the discussion of whether or not we want to look into it. And I'm saying it's a timely manner, or
Okay.
a timely issue.
Okay, sure. So,
We
Can I
can
go
discuss
ahead?
that Thursday.
okay, so on Thursday, that would be the appropriate time to declare it to be an emergency item for the timeliness, and then we'll have the discussion as a board.
I think we have to declare it today so that it's on the agenda on Thursday.
We can go ahead and put it on the agenda now.
Okay. However it gets on the, I don't care how it gets on the agenda. Okay. We're good? Okay.
Bill, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I do. I just want to recognize Mr. Mark Johnson, City Manager of Mineola. Mineola has been an amazing partner, happens to be one of the municipalities that I serve, and always grateful to see you here.
Stephanie, anything else?
I know you guys just received these this morning, and for me personally, after having gone on Friday and spent the day there, I wanted to thank you for the after, sitting and thinking this over this weekend, I just want to point out the common threads that came out of this for me, which were significant and impactful for Lake County schools in regards to Mrs. Kornegay. So the first thing is there's not any person that I spoke to within the district, principals, district leadership, board members, parents, that said that they couldn't call her. At any given time, she was available and she was responsive. And that is significant, that I feel like she has embraced the community, and she has displayed that in her work with Clay County, and that's something that she would bring to Lake County as somebody who's a voice for the entire community in our schools and within the communities. The other thing that you'll see as you read through these is her honesty and her integrity. And there were a couple of times that it was mentioned that she does have to make decisions, obviously, that aren't in favor of one group or another group. I had a high school principal say to me, fair or equal isn't always fair. And she can tell me no, but we trust her to make the decisions, and we know that she's making them with regard to our students. And so his last remark is what I'd like to leave you guys to. At the end of the conversation, he said to me, let me just leave you with this. She's been in our district for 13, 14 years, and she still has the respect of this entire community. So I just want to reiterate that integrity and honesty and that compelling piece of availability was very interesting, and leave you with that for this evening. So thank you again for that opportunity, and thank you guys for the opportunity too.
Thank you for doing a fantastic job representing us well and getting some great information and doing that legwork. Over the past day, all the stakeholder groups have been calling me to offer their feedback. I'll type that up. I thought I was originally just going to share it, but you can share it. You've set the bar high, so so I can get that for you. And I also had an opportunity to speak with a few of Clay County's board members who provided some incredible feedback as well. So I mentioned that I would pass it along to you as a board as well. So I'll make sure that you all have that information before we make a decision on our finalist. Mr. Johnson, I think you're next. Nothing from you? All right, any objection to adjourning? All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you.